Thank you very much, Honorable Prime Minister, distinguished panel members and guests. Again, I join my fellow panelists in saying that it's a great honor and pleasure to be with you this evening. Not surprisingly, we at UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, believe that it is time to invest in young people in Africa. And we strongly believe that investing in children and young people is not only the right thing to do, and thus a moral imperative, but moreover that all children and young people have the inherent right to survival, growth and protection, and with it are entitled to opportunities to reach their full potential. Does that make us idealistic dreamers or sound visionaries? I think we like to think a little bit of both, hopefully. And the good news is that the world is actually with us. All countries in Africa, and indeed around the world, have committed themselves to the principles enshrined in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and to implementing the provisions entailed in this most universally ratified human rights treaty in their own countries. Developing decent and productive work for youth is further a cornerstone and a principle of the Millennium Development Goals, which again is a global partnership and compact which all African countries have signed up for. More importantly, as we already heard, the demographics and the evidence show that this dream of providing opportunities for young people to reach their potential is also good value for money if we look into it. I will not go back into all the demographic details because the Honorable Prime Minister has already shown us what we're dealing with, but just to say that the current cohort of young people in developing countries is the largest the world has ever seen, and as we heard, is growing faster in sub-Saharan Africa than anywhere else. Roughly half of its population is younger than 18 years, and almost 2/3 are younger than 25 years. Unfortunately, and yet not surprisingly, looking at some of the pictures we looked at earlier, this youth bulge is often interpreted as a threat. However, since the fate of whole nations is vested in this cohort, the demographic transition must instead be seen as an opportunity. And I think we could all argue that young people are now the most abundant asset that the region can claim. Study after study further confirms that quality investment in youth development yields greater economic growth and social well-being for generations to come. On the other hand, missed investments in young people's intellectual and human potential are costly to reverse, both for youth and for the societies that they live in. And we could argue that the time has never been better to invest in young people in the developing world, especially in Africa. Why is that? Today's youth are tomorrow's workers, entrepreneurs, parents, active citizens, and indeed, we hope, leaders. And because of falling fertility over time, they will have fewer children than their parents as they move through adulthood, all in time this is. This in turn may boost growth by raising the share of the population that is working and by boosting household savings. Richer and poorer countries alike need to seize this opportunity before the aging of societies closes it. Doing so will enable them to grow faster and reduce poverty even further. So investing in young people thus strongly contributes to fighting poverty across Africa. However, at the same time, investing in young people is a challenge for governments and societies in all countries, rich or poor. So why is this the case? If we just take a quick look at some of the challenges and also hopefully at some of the solutions we need to be promoting. Education plays an essential role, as we already heard, in the transition to adulthood. Although youth literacy rates have increased considerably in recent years, progress has been uneven, and particularly sub-Saharan Africa has fallen behind. In Eastern and Southern Africa alone, almost 9 million children never make it to primary school. What does that mean for them growing up to be adults and be productive citizens? We can all imagine. In countries such as Somalia or Eritrea, less than 50% of primary school-aged children are enrolled. There are many reasons for this, which I will not go into in detail, but again, low quality of education, as well as access issues, particularly for girls, limited access to secondary education, and overall low levels of budget allocations are all part of this. So what do we need? Increased investments in and access to education is needed, especially secondary education, which is the minimum level of education needed to succeed in our increasingly globalized economy and to guarantee young people a smooth transition to decent jobs. Youth underemployment, we have already raised, is another concern. So to provide the unprecedented number of job seekers entering the labor market in the coming years with decent employment prospects, we need to improve our knowledge of which employment and labor market policies are most effective and commit to implementing them. It is crucial to provide incentives and capacities for youth to remain in their rural communities and be actively engaged in the rural economy, both in the agricultural and non-farm sectors. Stronger urban-rural linkages should also be created in order for young people to obtain access to markets and decent work opportunities. Finally, looking at investment in the health sector, where this might not necessarily be the most apparent, but particularly when we think about young people, and particularly in this region, it's one of the key concerns with the increasing HIV epidemic and the impact that this has, especially on the labor market. Young people must be at the center of the AIDS response. We must ensure that young women and men have access to accurate information and skills, as well as youth-friendly and gender-sensitive services to prevent HIV infection. Engagement and leadership of young people themselves is critical to ensure an effective response. I would like to also say a special word about the need to focus particularly on the needs and the opportunities to be created for young women, girls and young women. We need specific policies, legislation, programs, and measures that address the concerns, needs, and rights of young women and girls to ensure they are adequately prepared and protected in this stage of life. Initiatives focused on strengthening the capacities and skills of young women and girls are essential to enable them to actively and effectively participate in social, political, cultural, and economic life. And I don't think we can underestimate the impact that still very high maternal mortality rates, particularly amongst young women, have in our region. The good news is that there is increased commitment among African states. We have seen the emergence of a youth charter through the African Union adopted in 2006, and only 3 months ago, the first ever youth forum was held in parallel to the AU summit to feed into the discussions the heads of states had in Kampala. Before I close, I would just like to stress again, we strongly believe that now is the time to invest in providing the enabling environment for young people to grow into productive adulthood. In order to achieve positive outcomes in the areas of education, employment, health, and citizenship, a holistic approach to youth development is needed, focusing not only on young people themselves, but also on those factors that help shape their behaviors, such as families, communities, schools, the media, the legal system, and social norms. Makers need to invest in programs and activities that, based on empirical evidence, have proven to be successful in achieving their intended goals, and I think we will have an opportunity to discuss these kinds of examples a bit further. An effective portfolio of programs and policies that includes prevention and protection measures, second chance education initiatives, and development policies that disproportionately affect young people need to be developed and implemented. And finally, I would like to encourage all of us in looking ahead and moving forward that we need to listen to our young people when they themselves say, we're not the problem, we are the solution. And we at UNICEF could not agree more with that, and I hope many of you will do too. Thank you.